Almost every day I really got upset, and this means something, by a product with a bad usability or design. What about you? Don't you feel manipulated by media, commercials on how to spend money on certain must-haves? And is more of the same still the right and wise answer for the big problems we are facing right now? Think about a moment in time for last week. Was there a moment where you said, wow, this is a cool and real intelligent solution? And I'm not only speaking about commercial products or services, I'm speaking about everyday activities. Let me give you an example what I mean by this. About 25 years ago, I worked as a windsurfing instructor at the Lake Neusiedlersee. This lake is quite famous for strong winds. Back then, each week, before high season, pupils from secondary school arrived and they wanted to learn windsurf. And as you might guess, windsurfing and strong wind, or especially beginning to windsurf and strong winds, don't fit together so well. So what happened at each other windsurfing school I've worked so far, or what I have seen so far, was that about after 30 minutes, when the beginners were on the water, they were scattered all over the lake. And as a consequence, since they had to come back to the bank, they rather exercised their upper arms with paddling back, but didn't learn to windsurf. So seeing all this, my friend at the surf school had a brilliant idea. We poured concrete into used car tires, put a rope to it, and plunged the anchor into the water. On top of it, we put a buoy so that the rookies could fix their surfboards onto it. And wow, this completely changed the learning outcome. They weren't frustrated anymore by floating across the lake, but they were really able to train all day long the starting and the steering process while being attached to the anchor. After 3, maybe 4 days, most of them were able to go out, even with strong winds, and enjoy windsurfing. In a conventional setting, where you usually learn windsurfing in a 5-day schedule, most of them weren't able to even start with stronger winds. Let me come back to the beginning of my talk. What is going wrong in our high-speed economy when we are seeing, at least in my point of view, so many bad products and services? When working with established companies, we see a loss of meaning and a loss of purpose. Instead of creating desired and maybe flourishing futures, they are merely concentrating on profits and produce quantity rather than quality. I'm really convinced this is a vicious circle and which finally leads to a system crash. Look at companies such as Nokia, Kodak, the taxi industry, and I also think that this will happen about many other industries. A quote by Larry Page highlights this quite well. If companies become too successful, they miss the point when they should start to reinvent themselves. Let me quickly explain this with the sigmoid curve. The curve you see unfolding in the background describes life stages of living systems. So a living system can be an animal, a plant, a relationship, and of course also an organization. So these living systems, they start quite slowly by experimenting. Things don't maybe work out so well at the beginning, but nevertheless, if they are successful, they grow and finally wane. This may seem quite depressing at first, but it isn't. Plants and animals, they are reproducing themselves by putting a plant in and from the future. Organizations, however, they are often too complacent and resistant to change that they are already experiencing the decline of the curve. And this is a real dilemma for them, since they often lack then the energy and the resources to start this necessary new curve, which would be the foundation for their future. So I think the secret in sustainable growth lies in early innovation, which is indicated with point B, and not waiting when you're on the very high and top end. Summarizing all this, I see an urgent need of innovating innovation, but not just new methods or tools. I think we really need a radical shift in mindsets and attitudes. My dear science nerd Markus, this is your special topic.
So the big question is not only to find this kind of innovation sweet spot, so the right time, but actually, as Thomas already said, to find the point where you want to go. What is the purpose? To define a new meaning, to define a new purpose, and to somehow create a sustainable and thriving future. So how is it possible to learn from the future already now? And before we want to go to the future, actually I want to make a short digression into Old Greek mythology. And there we know, or the mythology tells us about a god who is called Kairos. Some of you might have heard him. So he's the god of the good opportunity, he's the god of good luck. He provides us with the possibility that we grasp a good opportunity in order to get somewhere to a better place. But interestingly, if you look at many depictions or many images of Kairos, it's always, or he is always depicted as being in movement, rushing away, running or flying. So what does it tell us? It tells us it's always necessary to grasp the right moment. And if you take a closer look, it's very interesting. If you look at the forehead of Kairos, you see a hair. And this symbolizes you have to grasp his hair in order to get him. In German, we have the saying, die Gelegenheit beim Schopf packen, which means that to grasp the opportunity with both hands. And even more interestingly, and I think that's something which is really funny, is in most images you see his back head without hair. What does that mean? This means that in the moment you didn't catch him, you can't catch him anymore, because he has vanished and you have no possibility to get a grasp of him. So the issue here is that you have to really jump into the right moment, do the right thing, and use this situation in order to get into a kind of flourishing future, which Thomas was talking about. So what we are looking for is a kind of method or approach, not a method, it's more of an approach or also an attitude as how are we getting in resonance with a thriving future. And for that, let's have a look how we can do that. So when you look at your own experience, what are you doing when you're in a situation where you have to create something new? Normally, our reflex, from a cognitive perspective, is to go back to the past, what has worked out well, and extrapolate it into the future. So in most cases, this brings about not very interesting things or even things which fail very, very easily. The more sophisticated approach is saying, okay, if it doesn't work in one shot, let's take a couple of shots and adapt to this kind of future where we want to go to. So this is a kind of trial and error process in which you try to optimize the way how you behave and where your product or services has to go to. So what we get with these things is normally like incremental innovations or optimized things, and you know these things. Apple tries to sell us like new iPhones or iPods with new colors as wow, the innovation, which is questionable. What we propose is to say, okay, let's turn things on their head. Don't go back to the past, but start with the future. Which means that we first take a look into the future, try to understand what are emerging patterns, what are emerging phenomena, and then bring these things back into the present and create a kind of enabling environment where you can cultivate these things or these products or these services or whatever in your life or in your personal life. So we refer to that approach as emergent innovation. It has something to do with emergence, so a new quality, something new emerges, and you don't do it, you don't create it by yourself, but you use the environment which helps you co-creating this novelty. And the question is, how can we do that? We propose 3 principles. Principle number 1, learning to see. I think that's crucial. If you look at kids, they see everything. I have 2 little kids, and they see every little detail and ask about it. And during your upbringing, during school, during university education, wherever you go through, our perception goes like from so to so. So rather than seeing, we are just projecting our own ideas and our own categories into the world. And that's exactly the opposite of what we want to do when we encounter novelty. Because novelty is exactly what we don't see yet. So we have to relearn to see. Give you an example. Example of a wall. Think about what comes up to your mind when you think about a wall. Imagine a wall, see a wall, you see all these different mental images. And this is what we normally think about a wall. Principle number 2, deep understanding of the core. Sounds a bit strange, a bit weird. But what do we mean by that? We mean by that to really deeply understand what is this object of innovation about. What is the core? What is the very essence? What is the very meaning? What is the fundamental meaning of this thing which we're having in front of us? So coming back to the example of the wall, this means a wall normally is thought to have something to do with separation, separating inside from the outside, so being a border, being closed, or being a kind of protection. Which is nice, which fits very well in our expectations so far, nothing new. But what if you want to innovate the wall? This brings me to our 3rd principle, where we try to get into resonance with the potentials and with wants to emerge. There has to come up a kind of shift, a mind shift, a shift in our cognitive activities, which gets away from what is already there into what is not yet there, what wants to emerge, what wants to come up, what has not been tapped yet. And if you apply that to our concept of the wall, you will see the hole in the wall, I'm sorry for that rhyme, is the potential of the wall, although the wall stays the same. So, what is the implication? A window. Just to show you how you can innovate the idea of a wall. So, the wall is still there, but it brings up a kind of completely new quality, but this new quality is already implicitly present in this wall. And if you develop this kind of thing further, you come up with the concept of a facade, or go even one step further with like these wonderful windows of a Gothic church in, I don't know, it was in France, I think, where we have the wall is still there, or the function of a wall, but it has a completely different understanding of what a wall means. It means to communicate some story, and even one step further, if you look at modern walls, like this, LED facades, this completely changes the idea of a wall, because the wall is not only, it's still about separation, it's still about protection, but it becomes an interface. It becomes open, it becomes a kind of medium, it becomes a kind of communication thing. And so what you see here is that if you apply these kind of principles, you will be able to come up and see new things which are not ready, which are not already yet there, but which are already inside these things. And that's what we call about, what we refer to as emergent innovation, which means that you don't have to manipulate and push the environment or the reality in an artificial manner, but you use what is already there, but you have to discover that. And Thomas will give you some of the implications from this approach.
We see economy and innovation moving in the completely opposite direction. For example, look at innovation by big data, which promises us to solve the big problems of our times. We do not buy into this. We think rather the opposite is necessary. So even so, this approach, as Markus described, seems to be not so analytic, not so quantifiable, not so recipe-like. Our experience shows that it is highly effective and can bring about real groundbreaking results. So why don't we all take this leap into the unknown future and be attracted by its potentials? I think thinking about this way is a complete different mindset and attitude, and listens, as Markus said before, to what wants to emerge. Finally, I want to really highlight the implications, maybe with a final sentence. So we don't have to push things. I think these potentials are already here, and at this time already they are lying in the future. But they are waiting for us to be identified, to be cultivated, and to be realized in order to create a better future. Thank you.